As I record this, it is April 5th, and this is for the Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee dated April 8th. I often, in fact always, record these ahead of time. Sometimes the day before, sometimes 3 or 4 days before. Today just happens to be the 5th, and looking at my calendar, 6 years ago today, I was in Gibraltar with... I went to Gibraltar with my wife. She was not my wife when I got there. She was when we left. So we got married in Gibraltar. Inspired in part by the Ballad of John and Yoko, the Beatles song. It's a long story, but that's what we ended up doing. So I'm just doing this a little bit ahead of time, and I'm just thinking about it today. It's been 6 years ago today. When we left, we promised ourselves we'd go back in 10 years. So just doing the math, theoretically, we are going to be back there in 4 more years. All right. So when I post this on Monday morning, the 8th, I will be in Las Vegas attending National Association of Broadcasters annual show, the NAB show, looking into and hoping to talk to exhibitors about how the NAB Show Cares program is working for them, since I did a podcast / video blog with that featuring BJ Enright of Trade Show Logic. That was back in January when she talked about the program. I'll put a link in the show notes to that. If I forget, just look it up. It's back in January. So, I'd be curious to be at the show. I'm an old broadcaster, as you probably have noted if you follow my blog or my newsletter at all. I spent a lot of years behind the microphone, and I still like getting behind the microphone. I volunteer for a local show. I do a reggae show, a couple hours every Monday night. So that's my background, but I've been in this industry, in the exhibit industry, almost 20 years. It's coming up on 20 years. I guess it'll be another 3 or 4 years, but I'm at 17 at least anyway. So, and I enjoy it. It's a great industry to be in, and I decided, since I have this broadcasting experience, it'd be fun to do this podcast, this blog, this video blog, which I've done for this is into the 3rd year. Although years ago I did another version of it, kind of, when I worked for the other company that I worked for. Got my own company now, Trade Show Guy Exhibit. I'm telling you all this because you may be a brand new listener, a brand new viewer, and if that's the case, I appreciate you being here. Head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review, leave a star, leave a thumbs up, whatever it is. I don't know. I don't know how good it'll do. It probably won't do a whole lot of good, but you just never know. So anyway, this week I do have an interview with a gentleman. I think you'll enjoy this interview quite a bit if you're in the exhibit world, the trade show world. I got a chance to sit down and talk with Tom Beard, who is with Ecosystems Sustainable Displays. They make a lot of great exhibits. I've worked with them for a number of projects over the last several years, and they use materials that are all recyclable, recycled, eco-sustainable, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about those in depth during this interview with Tom Beard, Ecosystems Sustainable Displays. I hope you enjoy the conversation. And welcome to Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee. I'm Tim Patterson, Trade Show Guy. I'd like to welcome Tom Beard, National Sales Manager of Ecosystems Sustainable Exhibits. Tom, it's so great to have you on the program. I really appreciate you taking some time. Thanks,
Tim. It's really good to have an opportunity to talk with you.
So tell me a little bit about Ecosystems Sustainable Exhibits, just kind of a brief history and how you got involved with them.
Well, Ecosystems was formed in 2007 as the only eco-friendly, sustainable portable modular system provider, and we still really hold that title to this day. The concept was that back in the mid 2000s, they saw an opportunity to offer a product that was unique and different, but yet stay within the trade show industry, and we carried that same work through now, and we're based in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and that's where we have our design and administrative offices, and we do our production in Portland, Oregon.
Well, it brings a couple of thoughts to mind. One is obviously with sustainability, and there's probably some changes in that world, but I'm guessing that as a result of the people wanting to have that, a lot of companies wanting to have that, there's been a lot of, if you say you were early on, there's a lot of competition that's come around. So you probably had to face both of those interesting situations.
We have there's a lot of there's some competition out there for truly building a sustainable exhibit, but where we probably face as much competition is people just trying to do it in house. The custom exhibit houses will resource materials they feel are meet the criteria of being eco-friendly or sustainable. And we'll use it in part of what they do, and not use those type of materials in other builds, but we use it 100% of the time.
Well, I look at there's a lot of different terms that are thrown around: recyclable, sustainable, reclaimed, repurposing. There's a lot of different ways to look at the materials that go into building exhibits. For instance, we did an exhibit here with a group here in town, a small 10 by 10. We used reclaimed barnwood for the facing of it. So that was an interesting project, but the entire thing was not reclaimed barnwood. They had to have a base for it and that sort of thing. But the look was really great. So there's a lot of those terms floating around. What's the best way to talk about the concept of being eco-friendly to your point of view?
Well, the way we talk about eco-friendly is that it carries it can be defined on several different layers. It's not only the materials, but it could be the inks and the adhesives you use, and then long term, what you're going to do with the existing booth at the end of its life cycle, and what you do with the materials involved. So it's kind of a cradle to grave type concept that we're in.
The other thought I have is, a lot of companies have, company-wide sustainability initiatives that they will recycle all sorts of paper. They'll do everything they can. And I'm just curious, in your experience, does that run into the trade show world a lot, or is that kind of infrequent? I'm just curious, when you talk to potential clients, your salespeople do, or your distributors, how does that come up in conversation? What kind of things do you guys talk about?
Well, what's interesting is in 2007, when we started Ecosystems, there was a lot of enthusiasm for this type of product. And even to the point where people were willing to pay more for it because the material cost was higher back then. Then a little thing called the Great Recession hit, and it put us in a position where people were still wanting to be environmentally friendly, but they didn't have the appetite to spend more money because of budget concerns, and marketing budgets were slashed, as we all know if we've been in the industry long enough. You remember those times, and so we became very, very aware that we had to resource materials, eco-friendly, sustainable materials that would be at a price point where it puts us on the same level as standard materials. And so companies, we've gotten to a point where we've had to almost reintroduce ourselves to companies as an option. What's really interesting is in 2007, many companies didn't have a sustainability initiative, although they thought it was a cool thing to have a sustainable booth. Now we've transitioned to where companies will have a sustainability initiative, a corporate-wide sustainability initiative, but not push that down to their trade show marketing program. And so what we're trying to do now is tie the trade show marketing program into the sustainability initiatives that companies have. And so it's like a re-education process.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because I had a conversation with a potential client yesterday, and they brought up the sustainable issue, and they thought that was important to them, which it was actually kind of rare on my part. Most people don't bring that up. If you bring that up from my angle, they oh yeah, that's important to us. But it doesn't seem to be something that's kind of they're leaning into. They'd love to do it if they can, but it's kind of like, we'll get to it around the corner. But so that was an interesting thing. So some of the misconceptions about the materials, I know you brought up this something that it was worth chatting about, are the misconceptions about the materials used in building an eco-friendly or sustainability-based exhibit. What kind of things come to mind when you look at that concept?
Well, when I first started with Ecosystems a little over a year ago, I would introduce the materials we use, and one of them, for example, is Eco Board. And when I would talk about Eco Board, I could just see people's, either their minds wondering about what is Eco Board, and initially I'd ask the question, and people would say, well, it's probably a foam board, or it's a it's a corrugated waffle board, something that wasn't really good material that they'd want to use in an exhibit. But in reality, EcoBoard is a polystyrene material that's on the same. It's our alternative to a Sintra. It's equally as strong. It's printable. It's a direct-to-print substrate. It's very high quality, equal price to Sintra, but it's a material that is completely biodegradable. It'll degrade in a landfill within 9 months of being thrown away. And so that's what makes it a sustainable product. But it's a material we'll use for printed infills as a alternative to Sintra, Sintra is a PVC product and it's not going to. It's very environmentally bad product. Carries high VOCs, and so it's, that's a great example of it. Our Eco Glass is an alternative to standard Plex, and it comes from 100% recycled plastics. We use an Eco board, a Rico board, which comes from it's 100% recycled materials, and we use that for our laminate infills. And these are all alternatives to standard materials that are really harmful to the environment.
And I'm guessing from your production standpoint, you've got to really kind of dig into where those materials are, where they're produced, how they're produced. And I'm guessing a lot goes on behind the scene that we'll never see for you guys to source that and have continuing access to those types of materials. Is that an interesting part of the whole process, I'm guessing?
Yeah, we're constantly on the lookout for new materials to use. And like I said, back in 2007, we weren't using the same materials we're using now, and for good reason. And so we're always constantly looking for something that's going to be better than what we're currently. And so it's the R&D is as important as anything we do right now.
And I'm guessing one of the things, when I look back, like you say, 8, 10, 12 years ago, to what was out on as eco-friendly sustainability, the quality wasn't as good as what you could get normally. And I'm just curious if the perception of the quality has changed and how people view that now with what materials are. Sometimes you can't tell the difference, but what's your perception of that?
Well, definitely the quality is in a lot of cases better than, like, for instance, the Eco board is a little bit more rigid than Sintra. It allows you to do wider spans without having to add additional structure in, and the print quality is great. And so those are just good examples of why we should be using this material. To answer your question,
is price a factor anymore as much as it used to be, like we say back when the recession hit, as far as choosing between one or the other?
No, price is now no longer a factor. In fact, there's some of the materials we can resource that are less expensive than what a new material cost would be. So we really have positioned ourselves. So there is no more objections, or shouldn't be any more objections, to price or quality. So it really just comes down to the design.
And obviously, if you're talking to a potential client, from your perspective, you're going to say this is what we offer. But from my perspective, I have more sources than what so I could go to a different vendor. Yeah, I guess that conversation with the client is important to ask those questions. So what kind of how do you approach that with a client from your perspective?
Well, what I do when I'm working with distributors, with our distributor network, I will sit with their salespeople, their account execs, account managers, and really emphasize that no matter what the materials we use, that's not the focal point we want to be looking at this time. Because if we don't hit the mark on design and at the price point your client wants to be at, it doesn't matter what the materials are. We need to really focus on and pinpoint that we're going to hit the design at a really good, innovative, creative design. And then I ask my distributors to just use sustainability as an additional benefit, to ask the question: does your company have a sustainability initiative, and would it be a benefit to tie it into the trade show marketing program? In a lot of cases, they they'll dabble in, a end user. Your client will dabble in it. Maybe they'll put on a video loop some information about their sustainability initiative, but they don't take it to the next step, which is incorporating materials that would tie into sustainability.
And one last question, just a kind of thought, because I've seen this a couple of times, but it's kind of rare. Maybe this is part of the conversation you have with those distributors or the end users, is that I've seen booths made out of something that is obviously recyclable material, recycled, sustainable, and they've got a little sign there. This booth was built with blank, and it kind of shows off their creds in a sense. Is that something you guys ever talk about? Or you ever ask them about doing something like that?
Well, I think that I've never seen it. We've never been asked to do that.
Okay.
Our role is to make you look good, Tim, and
right.
Not and not toot our own horn. We we don't want to be client facing. We want to be that valuable supplier in the background, because it happens rarely, but it does happen where an end user client will approach us because they know who we are, but we don't do business with them, and we do completely through our network of distributor partners. We'll stay in the background and deal with the people who know who we are and the value we bring.
Sounds great, Tom. I appreciate you spending time. And your website has a great search function for all those eco-friendly, great designs. What's that website address?
The website is ecosystemsdisplays.com, and we have a design search or display search option, and you can see the different kit options we offer: 10 by 10, 10 by 20, island, and then as well as other accessory items, counters, those type of things, charging stations, and a lot of other custom work.
Great place to find a lot of those eco-friendly designs that you may want to use. So thanks again, Tom, for spending time here on the program. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Tim.
All right, thanks again to Tom Beard, Ecosystems Sustainable Displays, for joining me on this week's Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee. Always good to have a great guest, and Tom certainly was that. This week's Trade Show Tip of the Week comes from my most recent book, Trade Show Superheroes and Exhibiting Zombies, 66 Lists Making the Most of Your Trade Show Marketing. It's available on Amazon. And basically what I did is I went through my blog for about 7 or 8 years of blog posts and grabbed a bunch of lists posts and edited, combined, condensed, expanded, whatever, and got a bunch of lists. And so I'm going to share one with you. This is 12 debriefing questions to ask yourself once the show's over and you're back at the office. And you talk to your fellow exhibitors, your trade show booth staff, the folks that were there with you that helped put this whole thing on. So some good questions to ask. Of course, you're back. It's been a crazy show. You're exhausted, and you got to get the expense sheets done. You got to pay bills. You got to do any leads or contacts, get them to the right folks, whatever. So here's some questions, though. You need to find time to do this. Ask some questions while it's still fresh in your mind. Question number 1, what did I learn about the booth? At the show, you will live in the booth for 3 days or 4 days or 2 days or whatever the case may be. And so you get to know it a little bit better. Because these things only get set up during shows, then they get packed away and they're in a storage room or a warehouse for months at a time. You never see them again. And you kind of forget what shape they're in. It's always good to take a look, take a lot of pictures when you have the thing set up, maybe even take pictures as it's being set up. So what did you learn about the booth? Is there something that needs to be upgraded? Do things still fit? Is it old? Is it working great? Question number 2, what did I learn about the people I worked with? Were they good cohorts? Were they in tune with what was going on? Were they well trained? If they weren't, it's not necessarily their fault if they didn't perform well. But again, what did you learn about the people you worked with? Number 3, what was most important to the visitors? You've talked to a lot of visitors. What was on top of mind for them as they interacted with you at your booth regarding your product or service? What was top of mind? Number 4, let's go back to the booth. What did not work about the booth? Booths have to function. Exhibits have to have a specific function. Sometimes you have demos, you have samples, all these various things, meeting areas. They're pretty basic, but they've got to be appropriate and they've got to function properly. So what did not work? Number 5, what was not important to attendees? You might have put a lot of stock in doing something, doing X in the show at the booth, and the attendees just didn't care. So was there something that was not important to them? Number 6 and 7 would be pretty, the flip side of the coin. What failed and what succeeded? So talk about that. Number 8, what questions got the best responses from visitors? I would presume that as you went into the show, you had some questions that opened up a conversation, and you probably tried a handful of them, I would hope. So what questions got the best response? Number 9, what was the visitors' most telling questions? I'm sure they asked questions. Did you jot them down? Did you make note of them in any way? And what were the ones that were the most telling about your product or service? Number 10, how can I use what I learned for the next show? Because if you're in the trade show world, you're always planning for another show. So what did you learn that you can use to make your next show better? Number 11, how much time do I reasonably need to prepare for any significant changes? If you've got booth changes, most of us do when we're exhibiting, and changes happen all the time, whether it's a new graphic, whether it's a new counter or some sort of display, banner stand, whatever it is. How much time do you need to reasonably prepare for those? And number 12, do small changes work, or should you look at incorporating large-scale changes? Is it time, and do you have the budget for a brand new booth, for instance? Or do you need to double the size of what you're currently doing, 10 by 10 to 10 by 20, or 10 by 20 to 10 by 40, or just adding 50% size? So do small changes work, or is it time for something much more large? And that's my look at the 12 post-show follow-up questions and activities. This week's one good thing, I got a CD. I heard about this guy probably a few months ago. There was an article, I believe, in the New York Times. Sax player by the name of Kamasi Washington. Crazy music. It's jazz, it's fusion, it's a lot of different stuff. And it's a double CD. Wait a minute, it might be more. It's a double CD. Earth is one side, Heaven is the other CD. So there's a CD on Earth, there's a CD on Heaven, 8 songs each. And then as I was tearing the plastic off, I noticed there's a tiny little sticker there that said how to open the album. And I wait a minute. What do you mean how to open the album? Go to the website. So you have a CD, number 1, Heaven. You have another CD, number 2, Earth. Okay, right there. And you got little inserts with that. But then there's this little third section there that's gosh, how do you put it? It's attached all the way across, except it's kind of perforated. And so it says you need to open that up. And I opened it up, and there was a third CD in there. You don't know about that until you stumble on it, or you go to their website. The third CD is called The Choice, and it's got some interesting cover tunes in there, like an old Carole King song, for instance. So 3 CDs. It's really cool. It's crazy jazz. I love it. It's Kamasi Washington, and it's called Heaven and Earth and The Choice. That's it for this week's Trade Show Guy Monday Morning Coffee. So glad you can hang out. And again, head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Why not? What do you got to lose?